Welcome to The Explainer. I am so pumped you're here today because, wow, we've got a truly fascinating piece of modern political and cultural commentary to unpack. Okay, let's just dive right into this. Today, we're focusing on a viral breakdown from YouTube creator Doc Rich, who recently analyzed this extraordinary UFC event held right on the White House South Lawn. Now look, this isn't just your standard sports recap. The source material weaves together massive event logistics, deep-seated political grievances, historical justifications, and even presidential security into one cohesive commentary. We're going to put on our observer's lens today. That means we aren't taking sides, right? We're simply mapping out exactly how this commentator constructed their argument and what it reveals about the wild intersection of sports, politics, and media in America right now.
So, here's our quick roadmap for this explainer. First, the South Lawn UFC event itself. Second, the partisan contrasts. Third, historical precedents. Fourth, spectacle and fan reactions. And finally, we'll look at venue security concerns.
All right, Section 1, the South Lawn UFC event, building a modern arena at the White House.
The source material kicks off by noting this dual celebration of the country's 250th birthday and Donald Trump's birthday. And the creator highlights just how absolutely wild the atmosphere was. I mean, we're talking about dirt bikes launching into the air, pulling off backflips with the White House literally right in the background. Then there's a massive live bald eagle, which, by the way, the creator notes is shockingly huge in person, flying directly over the cheering crowd. And then there's the crowning architectural achievement of the night, a colossal lighting rig suspended 100 feet in the air, affectionately known as the Claw. Now, I want you to consider this staggering number, 380,000. According to the broadcast coverage featured in the creator's commentary, this massive overhead structure, the Claw, reportedly weighs 380,000 tons. That is incredibly heavy. It was manufactured over in Belgium, fully assembled in Lititz, Pennsylvania, and then transported all the way to the nation's capital. The source emphasizes these numbers to really showcase that this wasn't just some pop-up tent you rent for a backyard party. This was a monumental feat of heavy engineering, specifically designed to protect the octagon and house the entire production.
And you know, the logistics just do not stop there. 1,000. The source points out that the Claw houses over 1,000 lighting fixtures, along with the PA system and giant screens, and it took over 1,000 hours of manpower just to build and calibrate the rig so that it fit perfectly, within mere inches of the South Lawn. The commentator uses all these details to build a real sense of awe, presenting the event as this undeniable, landmark achievement in event production, smack dab in the heart of Washington, D.C.
Moving on to Section 2, partisan contrasts, analyzing the political grievance.
So, the source frames the event politically, noting his strong support for Donald Trump. He frames him as a leader fighting an uphill battle against the mainstream media and the Democrats. And right here, we get to the core of his argument regarding media hypocrisy. The source notes that Democrats in the media were allegedly, quote, losing their minds, expressing outrage over a combat sports event being held on the White House lawn. But then he directly compares this reaction to a previous event hosted by Joe Biden for Pride Month. The creator points out that during that Pride event, an attendee was filmed flashing their breasts on camera at the White House. His main grievance here? That the very same critics who were so outraged by an organized professional UFC fight were remarkably silent about the flashing incident. By mapping this out, the commentator uses the UFC event to highlight what he perceives as a glaring double standard in political outrage.
All right, Section 3, historical precedents, Teddy Roosevelt and the strenuous life at the White House.
To counter the whole idea that fighting simply doesn't belong at the White House, the source pulls from early 20th century history. He highlights this fantastic quote, "A nation that cannot fight is not worth its salt." The source material points out that Theodore Roosevelt regularly invited boxers, wrestlers, and martial artists directly to the White House. And get this, he didn't just watch them for entertainment, he actively sparred with them. Roosevelt believed in leading by example and living what he famously called the strenuous life. So the commentator uses this history to validate the UFC event. He's essentially arguing that having combat sports at the executive mansion isn't degrading the office at all, but rather it's a return to a historically established American ethos of toughness.
And to really hammer this point home against the political backlash we just talked about, the source features arguably Roosevelt's most famous words. It is not the critic who counts, the credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena. By pairing this quote with footage of the octagon sitting right there on the South Lawn, the commentator draws a direct, powerful parallel. The fighters in the UFC, and by extension the politicians hosting them, are framed as the bold men in the arena. It's a strategic historical framing.
The commentator is attempting to disarm modern criticism by casting his opponents as just mere critics standing on the sidelines.
Which brings us to Section 4, Spectacle and Fan Reactions, the culture of outdoor fighting.
Beyond the politics and history, the source delves deep into the unique culture of the sport itself. He points out that, for many of these fighters, competing outside isn't actually new at all. He traces this evolution, vividly recalling the early days of Kimbo Slice, remember him? The internet sensation who gained fame through unsanctioned, bare-knuckle brawls in random backyards. The trajectory is just wild. It moves from raw backyard street fights to professional outdoor MMA promotions all the way to the absolute apex, a sanctioned, highly produced championship event right on the lawn of the White House. The creator notes that a lot of fighters probably prefer this outdoor environment because it really honors the gritty origins of the sport.
Now, intercut with this fighting culture, the creator also highlights the culture of the fans. The source includes a montage of what it calls real Americans down in Daytona Beach, Florida. These folks are shown enthusiastically sending birthday messages and expressing their unwavering support for Donald Trump. The commentator uses this specific footage as evidence to push back against the mainstream media narrative. He argues that, hey, regardless of what the critics say about the event or the administration, there's a massive, passionate base of everyday Americans who are completely on board with this style of leadership and this exact kind of spectacle.
Finally, Section 5, Evaluating Venue Security Concerns. The vulnerabilities of an open-air arena.
As much as the creator celebrates the event, he actually shifts to some genuine anxiety regarding the physical space in his final moments. Notice how the source analyzes the broadcast footage to identify specific security vulnerabilities. Because the event is entirely outdoors and completely exposed, the creator points out that several surrounding multi-story buildings directly overlook the arena. He notes that even if you're sitting down inside the venue, there are clear angles and lines of sight down into the crowd from those external windows. He expresses a really strong hope that the Secret Service has the entire perimeter absolutely locked down and buttoned up, with agents stationed in those overlooking rooms. It's a sobering reminder that hosting a massive spectacle right in the heart of DC comes with some pretty massive risks.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly important thought. As we just saw, this commentary perfectly captures the tension of the modern era. We love the massive engineering, the historical callbacks, and the raw energy of an outdoor fight. But the source's final anxieties force us to ask a tough question. As political events increasingly embrace massive open-air spectacles, how do we balance the thrill of the arena with the critical realities of presidential security? It's a huge question, and one that event organizers and security agencies are going to have to grapple with long after the octagon is dismantled. Thank you so much for joining me on The Explainer today, and I highly encourage you to keep questioning and analyzing the media you consume. Catch you next time.